Welcome back to View from Brussels. I'm Brandy Miller, and today in the studio I'm delighted to have Tullio Ambrosone, who is the director of the Single Market Lab. Tullio, thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, and thank you.
As anyone in the Brussels bubble knows, European competitiveness as well as the single market has been very hot on the agenda since the Letta report as well as the Draghi report. Today we're going to be delving in a little bit more into the Letta report as well as Tullio's role therein. Before we get started, I'd like you to talk a little bit more about your professional journey and what led up to you working with Enrico Letta on this report.
Yes, my professional journey with Enrico Letta started in Paris at Sciences Po University, where we started working together on the topics of European affairs, on the single market. I then had a chance to have some experiences in Brussels and the European institutions. I worked for the European Parliament and also NATO, so I focused a bit more on the defense aspects, the industrial defense aspects in that period. And then I went back home in Rome, in Italy. I started working for the European institutions together with Enrico Letta in his phase when he went back in Italian politics. And I then became his chief of staff, so I was the person who was coordinating his activities, and when the activity of the report started, I started working and coordinating first the journey, the 1 year we spent traveling across Europe, meeting stakeholders to grasp the priorities, the problems related to the single markets, and then also the elaboration phase of the report, which was, of course, a collective exercise that involved all of these stakeholders, experts around Europe.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, there were over 400 meetings over the course of a year.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so that's a little bit off topic, but how was that endurance-wise to have that many?
Intense and challenging for sure. More than 400 meetings all around the European Union. We visited all the European capitals and also peripheral areas of the member states. That was very important, not to have only the view from the capitals, but also from the other areas of the European Union. That was very important because at the end of the day, the single market is comprised of 27 member states. It's a large market, and it was important to have all these different perspectives before elaborating the vision of the report.
Yeah, and on the report itself, it's often described as a toolbox. So maybe segueing from the meetings that you had, how did this help you shape this toolbox, as well as have you seen this picked up by the institutions and reflecting what was already happening in those meetings and what was needed from the different stakeholders?
The meetings were crucial because we really had a chance to grasp the priorities, the challenges, and to see how they are distributed across the European Union. Because, of course, the perception of the single market in Poland is different from the perception of the single market in Italy, for example. So that it was very important to have a balanced view of where we are today, to have these meetings and to interact with all these different stakeholders. This led, at the end of the day, to a vision that was really consensus-based, was really our aim, the attempt we made was really to put on the table an agenda that could be achievable immediately, practical, and that could also have the consensus in the complex machine that the European Union is today. In terms of the impact, I would say that many of the proposals of the report have been taken up by the European institutions. This is visible in the competitiveness compass that was presented at the beginning of the legislature. Also, the mission letters to the commissioners contain many ideas and proposals of the report. I think about the Savings and Investment Union, the idea of the fifth freedom, the 28th regime. Several important ideas are there at the center of the policy agenda. Of course, the big deal now is implementation.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, the Savings and Investment Union was a key outcome of this report. Could you talk more about the most important projects and features to get this right, as well as the role financial institutions should play?
Crucial. This is a crucial point because at the end of the day, many challenges we are facing today, we know they require massive investments, but we do not have the tools to achieve these investment needs and to match our ambitions at the end of the day. So this was the starting point of the reflection on the Savings and Investment Union. We think about the green transition, the digital transformation, security and defense needs. We know really we need billions of euros of investments, and the instruments are not there, the tools are not there, neither at the national level nor at the European level yet. So the Savings and Investment Union is basically the idea that we know Europe is a capital-rich continent.
Correct.
However, we are not at the moment able to put this capital at the service of the real economy. And the Savings and Investment Union is basically a connection between the resources we have in Europe, private savings, and financing the objective that we have in front of us, the green transition I was mentioning, digital transformation, security. So it's about really building specific products, and here is where also financial institutions play a crucial role, savings products, long-term pension plans, and of course also incentivizing these actors, financial institutions, to play a role in this dynamic, because at the end of the day, they are the protagonists who have to reorient the investments towards Europe, towards the real economy. And here there is an important aspect, of course, that is the fiscal element. And this is complicated because fiscal competence is not at the European Union level, it's at member states level. Therefore, it's complicated, but I can make an example. One of the first initiatives of the Commission in the perimeter of the Savings and Investment Union is this recommendation that came out a couple of months ago on the savings and investment accounts. So this is a specific product for savers, for European savers. And this is really, at the end of the day, an instrument, a tool, a concrete tool that can bring these private savings into the real economy. But at the end of the day, it's a recommendation, point number one, so it's a soft law, let's say, instrument. And second, it works with fiscal incentives. So the European Commission on this front can only give a recommendation, can create a framework, but then it's member states that have to implement. This is, of course, a big struggle, and this means that we have to go also to advance on the more ambitious aspects of the Savings and Investment Union, that is the project to create a real European financial market. So putting together supervision, creating rules that are equal for all, and really creating the economic, financial dimension at the European level.
And this is a great pivot/segue to Europe vis-a-vis global competitors. So on that, could you speak a bit more broadly to the strengths that the single market has, as well as the challenges it currently faces vis-a-vis the US and China?
Yes. First of all, the single market has always been and remains our strongest asset, and this is a strong point of departure for our reflection. The second point is the stability. The single market is an anchor of stability in this complex international scenario, and this, I would say, is the strongest element we have today. It's the real strength we have today, and we have to leverage this strength. However, looking at the international scenario today around us, it's also true that we have a lot of weaknesses. The single market was created 30 years ago in a world that was completely different.
Yes.
And now, in really a short time span, everything has changed around us. And what has happened, basically, at the end of the day, is an era of continentalization. We were living globalization, multipolar interdependence, while today we have big blocks competing in an aggressive manner among them. And in this context, the dimension, the scale is everything. And Europe is too small at the moment, because we talk about the single market, but the truth is that in many sectors there is no single market. We have 27 different markets. So the key weakness we are facing today is fragmentation. The real killer of our competitiveness in this international scenario is fragmentation. And this was the starting point of the report. This analysis and understanding that overcoming fragmentation is the only way we have to really be competitive in this new, brave international scenario.
Correct. And for the 28th regime for enterprises, which was mentioned in the report, as well as the role that SMEs play in making the EU more competitive, what, in your opinion, should be prioritized by the Commission?
First, the 28th regime is a game changer, is the game changer, I think, because to overcome fragmentation, what do we need? We need simple procedure. We need one procedure, not 27 different procedures.
Yes.
So this is the idea of the 28th regime. And of course, the 28th regime has different applications. It can have different applications. And one of the most important ones is exactly for SMEs. Because the problem we have today in Europe is that startups, SMEs, struggle to scale at the European level because they have to go through the several layers, the different normative procedures of other member states. The idea of the 28th regime is to make this evolution simpler, and it's an optional regime, so it doesn't substitute the regimes, the national regimes we have today. It's an optional regime for those companies that want to operate on a European scale. So this is very important for startups and SMEs, but this is also true for large European companies that want to operate on the European scale in an easier way. And it's also true for companies coming abroad. So it's also true for attractive investments, because what companies coming from abroad told us in the meetings we had during the report is the same thing that companies in Europe tell us. Fragmentation, bureaucracy, 27 different systems. one system, one optional system, could be a potential solution to overcome this fragmentation and offer a pragmatic, fast solution to companies that want to scale and want to grow at the European level.
Could you also speak a bit about the maybe sector-specific, whether it's SME or already established organizations in energy and telecommunications, which stand to gain the most from deeper integration of the single market? What else do you think should be top priorities for policymakers within these particular sectors or even beyond?
I think there are two key words here, one for telecom and one for energy. For telecom, the key word, I already said it, is scale. The sector is really struggling now to be profitable. We know that for the digital economy we live in, we need massive investments, once again. And the scale of the market today, the scale of the markets are too small. There is one figure that is particularly revealing, and is the average number of clients per operator, looking at Europe, China, and the US. It's around 200 million clients per operator in China. It's 110 in the United States. It's 4.5 million here in Europe. So this is the scale.
Yeah.
This is the aspect of the scale. This doesn't work anymore. We really need to develop a real European telecom market that we do not have yet, in order to have these players, to have the scale to generate players that are able to compete at the global level and that are able to invest with those level of investments we need for the technologies of the modern era. So this is for telecom. In energy, the key word I think is interconnection.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, one of the biggest problems we have for competitiveness in Europe is the cost of energy. This is one of the fundamental elements of competitiveness. In the formula of competitiveness, the cost of energy is one of the most important elements. And the truth is that we have a high cost of energy in Europe. This is, of course, distributed across the European Union because we have a very diversified energy mix. So there are countries who have a good price of energy, but there are other countries, for example, the country from where I come, Italy, that has a significant problem with the cost of energy. Therefore, it makes no sense to have this fragmentation of 27 systems, really creating a diversified, interconnected energy mix at the European level would offer advantages to all member states, to all companies in our economic ecosystem, because it would allow us to have energy at a lower price and also have access to different sources of energy. And this is fundamental, of course, for the transition, because we need this also for the transition. We need to diversify our energy mix, we need to reduce our dependence on carbon emissions, and we can do so at the European level. And once again, the key word here is scale. We need the European scale to deal with some of these challenges.
Thank you so much. Well, there's a lot to unpack. We are running, unfortunately, shorter on time. Before we do that, I have two small questions. One being about the fifth freedom, the idea of the fifth freedom, which is mentioned, and anyone who studied EU politics already knows the original four freedoms. Could you elaborate a bit more about what drove the push or the idea of this fifth freedom on knowledge, research, and innovation?
It's pretty simple at the end of the day, because the single market with the four freedoms was created 30 years ago, I was mentioning it, in a completely different ecosystem, in a completely different economy. The intangible, the digital, was not present as we have it today, as a fundamental feature of our economic system. So the idea was that in the perimeter of the single market, there was something missing, something that we understand today, because today we have the digital economy. And the fifth freedom intervenes exactly in this dimension. It adds an element, and is the idea that in order to unleash the innovation potential of the European Union, we need to eliminate all the barriers to the free flow of knowledge, of research, of education, of data also, that I think are the inputs, the key inputs of innovation. We really need to eliminate these barriers to create a European ecosystem that is able, on innovation, on technology, where we really are struggling, we really are lagging behind our competitor, US and China. In this moment, there is another example I can make. 30 years ago, in the telecom sector, the European telecom ecosystem was launching GSM technology, and the world was following us, the Europeans.
Yeah.
Today, it's the opposite. We are struggling in implementing coherently and consistently across all of the European Union 5G technology, same telecom technology, the evolution of that technology, because we are fragmented, because at the end of the day we aren't able to have that capacity to lead on the technological front. We are followers. So the fifth freedom can help in this domain because it can create the conditions for our ecosystem to innovate at a faster pace.
At a faster pace, indeed. Well, as we now approach the 2-year mark since the letter report, as we're heading into 2026, if you had the benefit of hindsight, would there be anything you would approach in drafting, coordinating this report differently? Perhaps more meetings? I don't know.
More meetings would have been difficult. Oh, there is one aspect that we put in the report, but today maybe is even more important, and it's the aspect of defense and security. And it's a bit counterintuitive because, I mean, single market and defense are two separated elements in the European ecosystem. But this is not true anymore at the end of the day. What is happening around us today tells us exactly this. The single market is not an end in itself. It's a tool, it's an instrument, and we need to leverage it to achieve our objectives. And this means that the single market needs always to be adapted, it always needs to be refined, and this means that it needs also to evolve in time. And I think that today, the industrial dimension of defense, for example, must be a significant part of whatever reform we can do on the single market. And this maybe is an aspect that I would have raised a bit more in the report. It's a chapter, it has its importance, of course, but I would make it more important in the overall narrative of the report.
Well, perhaps a report part 2 or a second discussion as well in our studios. So on that note, I'd like to thank our audience for joining us here, as well as listening to Tullio Ambrosone here at A View from Brussels.